All right. Hi, Aaron. Hi, Edward. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com to discuss gay rights in America. Today is March 17th, 2013. I just wanted to go over two quick ground rules before we got our conversation started. The first is that right now this conversation is being recorded, and after the recording is completed, we'll be uploading this video to YouTube. Is that okay with both of you?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. And then on top of that, here at Vonvo, we're all about our conversations, staying both civil and valuable. We don't want there to be any personal attacks against anyone, especially if anyone comes into the conversation. Are you guys fine with that ground rule?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. So then let's get our conversation started. Can we start just with some general introductions? Give us just introduce yourself to those who are watching and anyone who ultimately ends up watching this video later on. A quick background of yourself and why you're so passionate about this topic. And Edward, you can go first, and then Aaron.
Me first?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Edward. This is John, who is assisting me today. I have mostly studied in history and current events. I have been pushing for gay rights for around 2 years now, including talking with my area politicians and around Facebook groups, and hoping to show this video to others who want to learn.
Great. And Aaron?
My name is Aaron. I'm a gay man, so I hope that helps the conversation. I am also a conservative, and so while I do support constitutional rights for every individual, I am very skeptical of anything labeled gay rights, as I think that would diminish a person, an American citizen.
Great. So, what I guess this is our first discussion on Vonvo regarding gay rights. I'd love to, hear both you guys kind of go back and forth on the entire, sort of topic as a whole and what can be done about it. I can sort of chime in with any questions if any come up, but, I guess I'll start off with, and then you guys can take it from here, is, overall, what currently is your overall assessment on, America right now and its treatment, towards this subject, and, how what people should understand about the subject right now in America. And I guess, Edward, you can go first, and then Aaron, you guys can take it from there.
Well, the current situation of civil rights or gay rights, or how you ever want to say it, it's been progressing pretty well so far. We legalized gay marriage in several states, mostly northern states, from Washington to New York to Maine. There's several states coming up soon which will be voting on whether or not gay marriage or not will be legalized. But there's still several problems that need to be addressed. In several states, mostly southern states, sodomy is still on the books as illegal, even though a Supreme Court case struck it down as unconstitutional. You know anything?
Okay, Aaron, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know if whether the states are in the north or in the south really has any bearing on the issue, and I also don't know, there are plenty of laws on the books in plenty of states that have already been deemed unconstitutional. It's only whether or not they can be enforced. That's the question in the Supreme Court. I do support gay marriage that is done through the legislative process, through the popular will of each state's electorates. And I believe in federalism, so I believe if one state wants to allow gay marriage, that marriage should be recognized in other states, but I don't believe that it's discriminatory for certain states to define marriage one way and other states to define marriage another way. I don't think that is inherently discriminatory. I also believe that often we would like to create special categories of citizens under the rubric of gay rights, and gay rights is much more the topic of quote-unquote gay rights is much more complicated than whether or not individuals have the right to marry. It also encompasses a lot of infringements on First Amendment freedoms. It hasn't gone as far as it has in other countries, but there is people who would like quote-unquote hate crimes legislation, and we also have hate speech codes on campuses that attempt to silence people of religious faith from speaking their mind and having their opinion on particular behavior. And so while I always will support an individual's liberty as as defined under the U.S. Constitution, and I'll vigorously do so, I don't believe that creating a special category of rights and special criminal, special legal categories for citizens based on their behavior. Because I don't believe that, while a person can identify as gay, I don't believe that homosexuality is necessarily an identity as traditionally understood.
Edward, do you have something to say? Go ahead and comment.
I'm not against anyone's religion. I think they should. If you're against gays and your religion, that is a part of your religion. You can't really go against it. You're against several other things. I'm not against that. What I am against is trying to force your religion on anyone else, trying to force your beliefs on those people. Gay marriage is not going to affect straight marriages as they'd like to claim. As I have a Supreme Court case that's coming up really recently where they quote, "Marriage should be limited to unions of a man and a woman because they alone can produce unplanned and unintended offsprings. Opponents of the gay marriage have told the Supreme Court. By contrast, when same-sex couples decide to have children, substantial advanced planning is required," said Paul D. Clement, a lawyer for the House Republicans. I find that to be ridiculous. They're blaming themselves to try and blame gays. That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous, but what about that statement is factually untrue?
The fact that gays have nothing... They even say gays take a substantial advanced planning required. That means gays actually think about adopting and caring for these children, while straight people produce unplanned and unintended offspring.
Your characterization of it or your opinion of that, and often cases, I do think many people have children that probably should have had some forethought and planning to prevent that from happening. But again, essentially when we're discussing marriage, we're discussing something that exists prior to any government conception of marriage. What the government does is it recognizes an institution that exists whether the government exists or not. Marriage has always been traditionally understood in society as the union between a man and a woman, generally so that they can create a family. Now, while that has changed, because we do live in a different society, and so people are able to organize themselves in many different ways now and deem themselves a family, generally the governments come in after the fact and recognize something that has been, occurring traditionally. And so I don't necessarily think that it's the government's role to impose a new vision of marriage on society. I think that it's society's role to recognize something that is occurring and then to adjust their laws accordingly. But I don't think that it's something that should be done top-down.
The problem is, things like DOMA causes gay marriage couples to pay more taxes than straight couples.
my understanding of the Defense of Marriage Act was that it was primarily intended to prevent judicial activists from going to court, getting marriage declared legal in one state, and then trying to use the Constitution and the Full Faith and Credit Clause to try to advance gay marriage on all 50 states. So I do believe, though, that DOMA is unconstitutional the way it's written, but I don't believe that it's proper for people to, I think it's proper for states to recognize marriages that occur in other states, but I don't think that because marriage occurs in other states that it's a constitutional right in all states.
I don't think the Supreme Court case is going to state forced to recognize gay marriage. Obviously, we're going to have to continue going state to state, trying to persuade people, look, this is not wrong. We have to decide to legalize this sometime. We have to decide now.
Well, what do you believe the federal government's role is in terms of how states choose to define marriage? You mentioned taxes as one. If I'm not allowed to get married in one state and somebody else is allowed to get married in another state, how should the federal government deal with that?
Well, I think it should be recognized. I think it should be recognized in all the states. It should be a definition nationwide, because we're a single nation, not a group of nations.
Well, no, but we are a group of several states, as the Constitution says, and that each state is uniquely autonomous. We do come together for many federal issues, but, you know, I guess what I'm trying to determine is under what basis would the federal government have to tell a state that they must recognize a marriage that they haven't voted into law?
When civil rights get involved, just like black and whites get married, they had to intervene in that.
In that case, was two people who are male and female wanted to get married, and they were discriminated on the basis of their race. The black and white person were not trying to redefine what was traditionally understood as marriage. So I don't think that the Loving versus Virginia case applies here.
I have a scripture from a Tennessee Supreme Court ruling that, hey, you're taking my airways. Sorry. Tennessee Supreme Court ruled in one marriage equality case that altered the definition of marriage would gauge the slippery slope, where you might have in Tennessee the father living with his daughter, the son with his mother, the brother with the sister in lawful wedlock, because they had formed such relations in a state or country where they were not prohibited. A man with his numerous wives may establish residency in Tennessee, and we are without remedy. Yet none of these are more revolting, more to be avoided, or more unnatural than the case before us. That case in 1872 involved an interracial couple who wanted the right to wed.
Want me to say? I mean, he's a bigot. But again, he wasn't trying to create a new type of marriage and then get the state to recognize it. Marriages occurred between slaves. Blacks who were not even treated as citizens were allowed to get married, a man and a woman, and have children. So nobody there was trying to alter the traditional definition of marriage. What they were trying to do was to prevent people who are of different races from getting married, and race is that is something that's spoken about in the 14th Amendment explicitly, that you cannot discriminate in most cases on the basis of race.
It's hard to slip that.
No, I'm sorry. So, I want my state. I really want my position here that I do support gay marriage. I do think that states will at some point understand that marriage is a civilizing force for people, and that they can't, on the one hand, denounce quote unquote gay culture and saying that it's full of men that won't settle down, promiscuous, running from person to person, never planting roots and living a party lifestyle. But then, on the other hand, say but then when the people come to them and say, look, well, we would like to stop doing that, and we would like to get married and form, a family, and doing so will create economic incentives, and will, provide a good financial foundation so that we won't be dependent on government benefits, all sorts of things, And so I think that when people, a lot of people come to that determination, but I also think that some people won't. And I don't think that people who believe that marriage, as it has been understood for thousands and thousands of years, is the union between a man and a woman, I don't believe that those people are bigots, and I don't necessarily think that people have to base that on religion. If you look at nations all across the world of different religions, the coupling, the definition of marriage has always been the union of a man and a woman. And if you want to look historically, I think that you could make a stronger argument that we have more historical precedents for polygamy than we do for gay marriage, because polygamy is legally practiced in many nations around the world. So if you are to impose a new definition of marriage on people against their will, saying that we don't have to look at the gender, okay, we'll take the one man, one woman in union, and we'll get rid of the gender differential, then the next person's going to say, well, what's so significant about the number one? Why does it have to be one man and one woman? Are you infringing on my religious rights? My religion says that I can take several wives, or a woman can say that my religion says I can take several husbands. And the Supreme Court has already ruled that states can define marriage because, there were several, most states outlaw polygamy. And a Mormon took that to the Supreme Court and lost, because the Supreme Court said that the states can define marriage in a way that they see fit.
As you know, I don't know if you know this, but when their slavery was in the South, they could get married, but they weren't legally married. And then therefore they were sold off separately at certain times. And occasionally, actually, their kids were sold off too. Therefore, it wasn't legal to actually get married if you were no offense, if you were black down in South when slavery was illegal.
No, you're right. It wasn't legal because they weren't citizens. So they didn't have any property rights because they were treated as property. But what I'm saying is that the institution, the slaveholders even allowed slaves to get married. So what I'm trying to say is that when there was a case in terms of interracial marriage, like the race of the individual is very different than determining whether or not two people of the same gender can be married. I'm not saying that that people of the same gender can't get married. I'm just saying that we need to recognize that is inherently different. Gay rights are very different than what is traditionally understood as civil rights, because civil rights were a discussion about people who had been disenfranchised. First of all, they were enslaved. Then they were discriminated against under Jim Crow, denied their constitutional rights as individuals, not necessarily as people wanting to be a couple. So, I don't like to hitch the quote-unquote gay rights onto the civil rights train, because that was a completely different discussion. There were people in this country who were denied their individual rights under the Constitution, and it had nothing to do with whether or not they wanted to get married.
Well, you see, what I think, my issue with this is that individual states have individual rights, and some states are really heavily dependent on their religion, especially ones down south. So, they might be more against religious, so they're more against gay marriage and whatnot. What my problem is when it crosses the line and they start going beyond just not allowing gays to get married. They go far beyond that and they start discriminating them and pretty much pushing them out of their state. That's where I feel the federal government should step in and stop them.
The slippery slope can work both ways. That they claim that the slippery slope can make a polygamy. Oh, well, what if you ban gays? Can you ban blacks and whites getting married?
No, you can't, because because that is racial discrimination is explicitly prohibited in most circumstances. You can talk about whether or not there are certain cases where laws can be tailored and discuss race, but you have to meet a very high threshold of, have to be a very high threshold of justifiability for that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that under any circumstance where your constitutional rights as an individual are being violated, if a state wants to prevent me from practicing my religion, if a state wants to prevent me from my rights of free speech, if the state wants to prevent me from my right of free association, so if the state is trying to close down gay bars or to prevent gay people from having a place to meet and associate, then obviously that would be discriminatory. But we don't need any new laws to say that that's discriminatory. We already have the Constitution that protects our individual rights. And so, the only slippery slope that I'm really seeing is the politicization or the political correctness that often goes along with quote-unquote gay rights. People who want to create speech codes on universities, who want to characterize religion in suppressing people's constitutional rights, because the right of my religion and the right of my free speech is something that's protected. And I don't see, and I could be wrong, there are bigots everywhere, and I know that there are a lot of bigots in the North and the South, a lot of racists in the North and the South, a lot of homophobes in the North and the South, but I don't see how, I just don't see on a political level how, other than wanting to keep marriage defined between a man and a woman, I don't see any national movement to discriminate against gays, to keep them from voting, to keep them from being able to be with each other, to keep them from, from engaging in all their constitutionally protected activities.
During my debates with the anti-gays on Facebook, they will usually discriminate being gay. Gays have AIDS, they all have AIDS, and they'll come up with reasons not to be against gay marriage, but to be reasons against being gay, which is, it's increasing, and hopefully we'll be able to beat that with the upcoming Supreme Court case with Prohibition 8 and DOMA.
How does that change people being bigots? I mean, if somebody wants to be an asshole, pardon my language, the government can't, it's not the government's responsibility to keep me from being offended and to keep me from being around people that don't like me because of who I am. Unfortunately, to have a racist attitude is perfectly legal and constitutionally protected in this country, and so is being a homophobe. It's only when you cross a line and you want to beat someone up, commit violence against them because that they're gay, are you committing a criminal act? So, I'm really sorry that your encounters on Facebook with people who are conservative are with a bunch of ignorant people who, I'm really sorry that that's happened, but I don't think that is, I think that is more a characterization of ignorance and not necessarily a characterization of them being conservative.
I think they're braver over the internet than they are in real life is what the problem is.
Because there's no consequences for the stuff that they say.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Max, did you have any further questions? I don't know how much further I can take this. Are you still there? Was there any questions you had, Edward, of me? I mean, were you interested in... Are you in college?
Yes.
How old are you? Do you mind me asking? 21. Well, I'm just curious. I mean, do you find what are your encounters with people of your own age? Do you find that most everyone is in support of marriage?
Everyone I encounter in real life, everyone I speak to, they support gay marriage. They support your rights. They support everyone's right. You have a right to do what you are and who you are. You can be who you are, and there's not our right to take that away. We can't.
Well, but for me to be in a relationship with who I want to be with is already my right. You know, so I get, you know,
we don't have the right to do something that you can't do. It just doesn't feel right.
Well, I mean, somebody's going to play in the NFL, and I can't play in the NFL. I mean, does that mean that I have?
But that's based on skills. You still have equal. You can go out right now and start working on it. You might make it.
I just want to be careful because, you know, the ability for me to pursue my own happiness exists whether or not I have a marriage license. What the marriage license provides me is some legal, you know, some easy legal contract and some benefits from the state in terms of tax benefits. But in terms of being an American and having the freedom to pursue the type of happiness that I want without harm to others, I believe exists. You know, and I again, you know, I really believe that as a country we are very tolerant of people, and I believe that gays have seen a phenomenal amount of acceptance in this country over the last 20 years. It's far different, you know, I'm not an old man, I'm 35, but it is very different than when I was in college 15 years ago. So, you know, I appreciate that, but where do we see the country being in 10 years regarding this issue? I think that we will see a country that probably has 15 to 18 states that have gay marriage and other states that don't. And I think that we have one political party that would like to create a wedge and try to say that the states that don't recognize, that have not changed their definition of marriage to include same-sex partners are somehow bigots. And I just don't believe, that to be true. But I do believe that more states will legalize gay marriage.
I agree. In a couple of years, it's just inevitable for more states to slowly and change their views and come over to the side of gay marriage. And it's always been, it's like a repeating thing in America. When we meet this wall and we slowly climb over it, and then we make it. But we meet another wall and we slowly climb it and we make over it. And we're always pushing forward and we're always trying.
Okay. Well, you know, another thing is that I also believe in the next 10 or 15 years we will have a significant challenge to the definition of marriage over polygamy. I believe that several Muslim people will bring discrimination complaints against their several states and try to get it to the Supreme Court, saying that if states can recognize gay couples, then they should be able to recognize polygamous, is that a word? Couples, based on their religion, and that
issue. There'll be all this other stuff. We'll see what happens if we make it.
Well, I know it will happen. I mean, we had a woman marry a whale in Israel, so I know that there are enough people out there that are going to try to push the boundaries in every way possible. And the question is where is America going to draw the line? And in drawing that line, are we going to then say that other people are being discriminated against, like people like Mormons or Muslims, or, you know, I don't know. So that's me.
No LGBT out there. It is a fine, a huge fine, and you can go away for life in prison in Iran. And in Saudi Arabia, Yemen, you know, die in Saudi Arabia, Yemen. Yeah.
They take men, they take gay men, and they hoist them up on, or they drop them off of cranes to snap their neck or throw them off cliffs. I think Norman was making, I don't know, Norman, are you making a joke about the president of Iran saying there are no gay people there? I can't see. Well, I have to run. If anybody else wants to jump in, that would be great. But Edward, it was really great talking to you.
Yeah, it was great talking to you too.
Take care. Hopefully we can do it again.
Yep, great.
Bye-bye.
Hold on. Basically. Just watching them talk now. Hard to say where the boundaries will be.